The 19th series of Thomas the Tank Engine began airing on the 21st of September 2015 in the UK, and on the 13th of October 2015 in the US. The series was narrated once again by Mark Morricone for the UK and US audiences, respectively. With this being the 19th series of the show, and the third series that Andrew Brenner has headlined for, how does this series hold up? Well, let's have a look. Each episode of the series was basically just focusing on some of the classic characters, as well as introducing a few new characters like Philip. In fact, from what I can remember, Philip is the only new engine that was introduced in this series, since most of the episodes were focusing on some of the already existing characters. Philip has a big personality. He's a comic character and a bit of a clown. He's very eager and full of enthusiasm, and has an innocent, but very overblown sense of his own capabilities. He can be very funny, but some of the bigger engines can have very little patience for the little boxcar. In fact, in one episode it was said that Philip reminds Edward of Thomas when he first came to the island of Sodor. That's quite a nice callback to the original series. Now, I'm not really going to talk about every single episode of the show, because that would just make this review too long, but I will talk about some of my favourite episodes from the show. Like Lost Property, where some railway inspectors come to Sodor and one loses his watch during Thomas's inspection. This one is nice to see because it's the first time in a while I've seen some railway inspectors come into the railway. And it's another one of those situations where first they seem very unimpressed, but after a heroic action from Thomas they start to become very impressed indeed and give a good review of the railway. In The Beast of Sodor, Spencer arrives at Timothy's sheds one snowy evening and tells a tale of the abominable snowman. This is actually quite entertaining because you see the Fat Controller get into a lot of kerfuffles with his car through the snow. And the funniest moment in this episode has to be this scene.
Maybe the abominable snowman has taken him. The abominable snowman! Abominable snowman! Utter piss-toss.
Goodbye Fat Controller kind of reminds me of Thomas and the Rumours from Series 5, because it overlooks the whole rumours thing where someone hears something and then gets the wrong idea. And this is actually a very entertaining episode, and even though we as the audience know the truth, you do see how the engines are going to miss the Fat Controller when they think that he's leaving the railway forever. And from what I can remember, it's the first time in years we've seen the engines of Sodor go on strike. I mean, I don't think that's happened since the classic series ended. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section below, but I can't remember it ever happening in the new series until now. And the ending is pretty funny too. And Salty All at Sea is quite an interesting episode because it tackles something that we've never heard before for Salty. The fact that he's never actually been on a boat at sea before. Yeah, you surprised? I mean, all the times we've seen him, he's told so many tales about the sea, and yet we've never actually seen him on a boat. And it turns out that he's never actually been on a boat before. Which raises the question of how the hell he got to the railway in the first place. Yeah, maybe he just used the bridge from the mainland, but it's still a very interesting episode about Salty. Another episode I quite like is Thomas the Babysitter, where Thomas must deal with a noisy baby on his train. And this episode stands out for me the most in this series because it's dealing with something that I normally deal with in everyday life on public transport. Crying babies.
Oh, I don't think babies like trains. I'm not looking forward to this journey at all.
And usually I can't stand babies crying due to having bad experiences with them on public transportation. But I honestly quite enjoy this one because it actually reflects something that I often go through in my everyday life. And it might make me sound like a cold-hearted bastard, but I just can't stand babies crying on public transport, or anywhere for that matter. But with like the young infant babies, sort of like a month old or whatever, I can understand it because they're babies and aren't able to talk yet, and crying's the only way they can communicate. But with children that are old enough to talk, that's when it really pisses me off. Especially when the parents are trying to shut them up and calm them down, but with no avail. But the thing that really annoys me is when the parents just do nothing about it. But this episode doesn't do any of that. It actually has the mother trying to calm the baby down, with no success. And that's what makes it stand out for me the most, because it's something I experience in everyday life. This episode also takes a pretty heavy hit at Sharon Miller's writing style, Just listen to this bit of dialogue.
I know what to do. Every time I stop, the baby starts crying. So, I won't stop at all.
That's a terrible idea, Thomas.
What about the other passengers?
And you'll get into trouble with the bus controller.
I suppose you're right.
Ouch.
Oh, silly you.
Clever us.
And Diesel's Ghostly Christmas, what the hell can I say about this episode? It's the Thomas the Tank Engine version of A Christmas Carol. And it was the first episode that was like 20 minutes long. Now I know it's technically a 2-part episode, but I like to call it a 20-minute episode since it's basically all the same story. Pretty much like how a lot of the episodes from the Classics series were split into 3-part episodes. A lot of people may have been wanting a Christmas Carol version of Thomas, and Diesel's Ghostly Christmas is the closest we'll ever get, I think. And in the episode The Other Side of the Mountain, Jack from the Pack makes a cameo in the episode. And this is the first time we've seen them in an episode since the 12th series. And I say series because I know we saw the Pack in Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, but I'm going episode-wise. Like I've said in my previous reviews of Thomascember, Rosie barely gets any time on the screen. Of course she gets some cameos, but we never see her have a proper appearance as well as an episode to herself. And I know you're all going to say, here we go again. But I do think that Rosie could have had some more screen time in this one as well as her own episodes. I mean, we haven't had an episode with Rosie all to herself since Rosie's Funfair special. And I really think she deserves more time on the spotlight since she's one of the few new series characters from series 8 to 16 that I really do enjoy. So, try not to repeat myself here, but I do hope that Rosie does get more screen time in the future. The 19th series also has a revamped version of the engine roll call, which isn't as ear painful as the first version, but I still prefer the original theme tune. But this is less painful for my ears. Another plus for this series, and this is a callback to my review of the 18th series, is that the animation is very spectacular too. Right down to the sunset scenes, they just look amazing. This would also be the last series with music composed by Robert and Peter Hartshorn since their contracts ended after Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. The new composer, Chris Renshaw, would take over as composer from Thomas and Friends in 4D, Bubbling Boilers, and The Great Race onwards. But we'll get to that when we get to the next review. So Series 19 is definitely an improvement from the previous series, as well as the other series from Series 8 to 16. A definite improvement over those. So the series is definitely getting better and better each year since Andrew Brenner became head writer, and Series 19 is a good example of that. So me overall, I would highly recommend this for any Thomas the Tank Engine fan. It's got entertaining stories, very few new characters since they're focusing on the original characters, and the first ever Thomas version of A Christmas Carol. You'll get a lot of enjoyment out of it, as I know I have. And Diesel's Ghostly Christmas really does get you in the mood for Christmas if you want to watch it.